Welcome to 'Cause We're Nerds, the podcast that covers trends and new releases in comics, movies, video games, board games, and much more. I'm your host Caleb, and today we're talking Pokemon. Are the titular creatures really this world's animals? Where are all the fathers? And what dark secrets does the series hold? Find out on this week's episode of 'Cause We're Nerds. Hello, everyone. This week we're joined by our one and only Zach. Welcome, Zach.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Although by the time this episode comes out...
more like Happy Thanksgiving or Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Finally, we're on a better recording schedule, so we record these a bit ahead of time now, so it doesn't kill us trying to get them edited and everything out.
That's right. So... stuff we say now is a bit outdated.
Yeah, that's why the news doesn't work so well for us anymore. But that's
Not
okay.
at all. That's okay. It works.
Right, because next week, Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee come out, and so we thought this would be a great opportunity to, instead of talking about Pokemon versus Digimon, which we did a few weeks ago, please go check that episode out if you're interested, we would just talk about Pokemon and what makes Pokemon itself great.
Now, Caleb, for our listeners out there, and not anybody on this podcast, because everybody on this podcast definitely knows this, but for our listeners out there, why don't you just describe what Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee and how that's different from Pokemon Go?
Ah, yes. Good point. So, Pokemon, since pretty much when it started, way back in the 90s, has been a Game Boy Color, Nintendo DS game, right? It only comes out on those systems. And there's been some spin-offs, but the main games have been on the handhelds. And then they came along and they did Pokemon Go, which it takes elements from the handheld games, but really changes them to fit a mobile phone experience. So like in Pokemon Go, you can't really battle anything except for gyms, and that battling is very different than it is in the games. The catching mechanics are very different, but the core of what it is, where you're a trainer and you catch things, that's still there. What Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee are pretty much those handheld games, but brought to the Switch. They are a remake of Pokemon Yellow, one of the earliest games, with some updates and some new features, and obviously in full 3D on the Switch for the new gamers.
And this is very different from the other console Pokemon games that we have gotten in the past, such as Pokemon Stadium or other console Pokemon games.
Pokemon Coliseum. Yeah.
Yes.
So like Stadium was only battling. Coliseum was the first one that was kind of like putting a regular Pokemon game on a home console, but it wasn't really the same thing. The core mechanics were there about battling and catching, but catching worked very differently. You kind of like stole Dark Digimon back from other trainers. The game wasn't as long. The story wasn't great. It had a sequel called XD Gale of Darkness, which has very mixed reviews. It's not held very highly in people's minds, but those are still spin-offs. They're not really considered to be mainline series. And so Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, while technically they are still spin-offs, they are way more in line with the mainline games, and we actually are getting a new mainline game, or two games probably, next year in 2020 at some point, which are supposed to be like the next evolution of Pokemon. So a couple of years ago, they made Pokemon 3D. This one, I'm assuming, is going to introduce like new gameplay elements and stuff, but that's next year. Right now, we're just talking about Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. But before we get too far, I thought it might be helpful to cover the origins of what Pokemon is. So, as most of you know, Pokemon started in the 90s. It was created by a guy named Satoshi Tajiri in 1996. Now, Zach, you might be thinking the original games are Pokemon Red and Blue. Is that correct?
What do you take me for? A weeb?
Yes.
Come on! No, the original Pokemon games, if I am correct, is Pokemon Red and Pokemon Green.
That is correct. So in Japan, they were released as Red and Green. About a year later, Blue came out, and it was a updated version of Green. And that's ultimately what we got over here in the US, was Pokemon Red and Blue. And I'm pretty sure our Red was even the blue updated version just switched with the Pokemon from Red on that version. But do you know what the main inspiration of Pokemon is?
Pocket monsters.
Haha, funny.
Nah.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, which I'm pretty sure is no one, because everybody knows, Pokemon is short for Pocket Monsters, which is actually what it's called in Japan, but it is inspired by bug collecting.
Oh, bug collecting, okay.
No,
I didn't know if it was like
collecting.
Tamagotchi or animals or whatever.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, Satoshi, like, collected bugs when he was little. That was kind of his thing. And so he was trying to think about how he could bring that experience that he loved so much to people in a game. And that's kind of what led to Pokemon. That's why you have a bunch of different types of Pokemon. That's why you have the catching mechanics of going around and collecting them, because you got to catch them all. You know, just like if you're trying to collect all the bugs in the world, that's kind of what I'm assuming you would do, because I've never collected bugs.
But you've collected cards, and it's the same. You gotta get all the Dragon Ball Z cards. All of them.
Yeah. Although, no. But Zach, we talked about Pokemon a couple weeks ago, so I know that you have played several of the games, but maybe not as many recently. Which ones have you played?
So I grew up on Yellow, which was the newest one after Red and Pokemon Blue. And that one you started with Pikachu, and then you were able to get all three starters as well. So great game. If I had a Switch, I'd probably get this Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu again, just for the nostalgia kick.
Mm-hmm.
But I grew up on that. We'd trade back and forth. I'm pretty sure I traded you a Charizard. You got a disease, which is actually... at the time, we're like, come on, man. But it's actually good to get the disease because it like raises their attack value. I don't know. There's a whole like breeding community of Pokemon players. Make of that what you will. But I played that. My brother had Pokemon Silver. I know you had Pokemon Gold, which was the next iteration. And so I was able to play his Pokemon game. After that, I think I got, what was the next version? Was that Pokemon? It wasn't White or Black. What did it jump to next?
No, so one of you guys had Crystal, which was the enhanced
yes, that's
Gold and Silver.
I had that, yeah. So I had Pokemon Crystal.
Yeah,
no,
and then...
Blaine had Pokemon Crystal. I had.
Okay, one of us had. But you all played it.
And then, after that, I remember then I had Pokemon Leaf. No, he had Leaf Green. I had Leaf Green.
Ruby and Sapphire came next.
Oh, that's right. We did have that.
Mm-hmm. And then Leaf Green, and Fire Red, and Emerald was somewhere around in there.
Yeah.
Yep. And then I think it went to Diamond and Pearl.
I'm
or was
pretty
Black
sure
and
there
White
was
next?
Black and White. And
Black and White.
Yep. And then that's when I kind of stopped. And then there's Diamond and Pearl. I might have played one more after that, but I haven't played any more since.
Okay, gotcha. So I'm kind of similar. My first Pokemon game was actually Pokemon Gold. And I remember getting it when I was little, and I was super excited. I actually saved up to buy my Game Boy Color myself. And then I got Pokemon Gold for Christmas, and I was super excited. I don't remember my first experience with Pokemon. Apparently, it was before that, because I knew what Pokemon was. It was probably the anime, I'm assuming. But I got that, and I was super excited. And then I actually didn't own another one for a very long time. Eventually, I was able to go back and buy Pokemon Red off eBay, which I remember at the time, my mom was like, you can't do that. You don't know it's going to work. You're going to get a busted copy. Because this was, way back in the early 2000s, eBay was still kind of unknown.
Well, joke's on your mom. You got that for like $5 instead of spending $50 to $60 nowadays.
Yeah, for real. So I got that and I played through it. And then I had a friend that had Ruby, which I kind of played through. And then I kind of fell off of it until X and Y came out, which was, maybe 4 years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago. And I got Y, and I played through it. And then I got like super into it, and I was going to play through all the games. So I went back and I found cheap copies of most of them. I've got Black or White, one of them. I basically got one from each generation.
I mean, you can also get emulators online as well. So
yeah, true. But I wanted the authentic experience.
Got it.
Because I had a Game Boy and I had a DS. I had everything I needed to play them. I just wanted the games themselves. So I bought everything up through until Y, and I already had Y. And then they started doing remakes, which is what Leaf Green and Fire Red were. They were remakes of green and red, I guess.
Yeah.
They did Heart Gold and Soul Silver somewhere in there. And then they did Omega Sapphire and Alpha Ruby, Alpha Sapphire and Omega Ruby. One of those. Which are remakes of Ruby and Sapphire. And I think those are the last ones that they've remade, but they did do enhanced ones of Sun and Moon, which is the generation that came after X and Y. But that kind of got me back into Pokemon, so I started playing more. I ended up not playing most of those that I bought. I've still got them in a stack to eventually get to, but I did play through at least most of Y. I can't remember if I got to the very end or if I was about to beat the Elite Four. I'm pretty sure I beat the Elite Four. I got Sun, I think, earlier this year, and I played some of that, although I kind of fell off of it. But one of the things that helps me with this is at work, we are all a giant group of nerds. And so every February, we actually all get together and we each pick our own version that we're going to do, and we all play Pokemon together.
For the whole month?
For the whole month or until you beat it. So
instead of working? Nice.
No, we definitely still work. This is kind of on our off time. But we play through it and we talk about it. So for the first few years, it was a lot of playing, the classic games. And then some of the people decided that wasn't enough and they went off and started playing hacked versions of the games, which are completely different. Some of them have original Pokemon. The stories are all crazy. That didn't work so well for them this past year. One of the guys got this super janky hacked version of Yellow for the NES or Super NES, and it ended up wiping his save after 8 hours. So
Pallet Town syndrome, man.
Yeah,
I'm telling you, it's real.
that kind of stopped him there, and that's when I was playing Sun, but I didn't get too far. But this year, actually, we started something kind of new. It didn't end up working well because the whole month kind of fell apart, but. There's a website, I can't remember what it's called, but basically you can go on and create teams of Pokemon, and you can battle each other online. And so that's something we've never been able to do because we're all playing different versions. And so what we would do is each week we would come in and you would basically take your team from your game and put them into the system as exact as you can. And this system is crazy. You can select the level the Pokemon's at, all of the moves. I think you can even select as IVs and EVs, which are behind-the-scenes stats for how good your Pokemon is. And we would battle, and the goal was to have a tournament each week and kind of see, who had the best Pokemon. And that was actually pretty cool. If you have a group of friends that's willing to do that, I would highly suggest trying that out.
Do you know what's the URL for this website?
Hold on, let me see if I can find it. Is this it? It looks like it's PokemonShowdown.com. So there's an application that you can download to do it, or you can just do it in the browser. We just did it in the browser. It's free. It's probably technically not legal because they're illegally using the Pokemon IP, but you're not downloading anything. So, I mean, it's safe
and don't
to
download
use.
Don't download stuff from sources you don't trust. Public service announcement for everyone out there.
Yeah, use at your own risk. But we used it and we didn't have any issues.
Nice.
It's pretty good. But anyway, so that's interesting that you haven't actually been in it that much. You're probably like most of our listeners that have actually played, where you've kind of fell off in recent years. Do you remember which game was your favorite? The one if you had to play now, one that you've already played, which one would you go back to?
Oh, always Yellow. That was my classic, my first game. Play it every day, all day. Get that Mew hack right away. It would be great.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely Gold. Probably, again, because that was the first one I had. But Gold and Silver, I think, are still some of the best of the entire series, because one thing that they have that the others really don't is a massive post game. So you'll go through the main game in the Johto region and you'll beat the Elite Four, and then you can go to the Kanto region, which is the entire map from the original games, and you can go through all the gym leaders there and catch all those Pokemon. And they really didn't ever do that again after that, which is a shame because it's really cool. But even now, there's practically no post-game at all, because once someone beats a game now, they kind of set it down and don't look at it again.
I thought the latest one did have a post-game with the Hawaiian Pokemon. Ohana means club of Pokemon.
Ohana means family.
I thought there was a post-game for that one, though.
They all have a post-game, but it's either incredibly short or not really useful at all. So like now what they're kind of are is like, oh, you can go do some extra battles, or if you keep playing and you're connected to the internet and you keep checking, they'll give you like mythical Pokemon and stuff, but it's nothing like it used to be. Like in Emerald, they had the Battle Tower where you could go and kind of tournament through this whole thing. They don't do any of that kind of stuff anymore, which is, I mean, it's kind of just what games do these days, because there's so many things out there that people want to do. We typically don't spend as much time on any single thing. So, I mean, that makes sense, you know. But Gold and Silver for me are the highlights. I haven't played the remakes. I started Heart Gold, but it's weird. That's kind of in between when they went 3D. So, like, the environment and the buildings are 3D, but you're still a sprite, which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, like I said earlier, they did later go 3D. That was in X and Y, which is kind of why I jumped back on at that point. Some of my favorite Pokemon are actually the ones that look, I don't know, a little bit more prehistoric, if you will. I don't know if you know Aggron, and that evolution line. It looks a little bit like Kangaskhan, but like a steel version. That's one of my favorites.
Oh, for sure.
Yep. I also like, I think it's Metacross.
Yep.
This is the one that kind of looks like a giant sheet of ice with legs.
Yep.
Those are pretty cool. The dragons, I mean, everybody always loves the dragons. What are your well, if I can speak, goodness. What are some of your favorites, Zach?
Scyther. Always love that one.
Yep.
That was a good one.
What about Caesar?
You know, he was okay, but nothing beats Scyther.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. I always wanted a Caesar, but Caesar was, I think, trade only, so I never got it.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Alakazam was always one of my favorites. Super OP, as always.
Yeah, of course.
That's about it.
Oh, okay. Well, short team. So you didn't have like a set team you would play with whenever you play through the games or anything?
Nah. I mean, it was always random. You know, I don't have a favorite starter. I would always switch off one for the other. I mean, I usually chose, like, I think it's like 65% of people always chose the fire starter. I was part of that. I think I always favored fire, and then I would choose grass and then water. And so grass was always my second highest, which usually I think water's the second highest. But other than that, I mean, not really.
Okay. I'm kind of like you. I typically just, I'll pick my starter, and like if we're talking gold, I've played through gold many, many times. I've played through all the starters. And I will pretty much just play with whatever I catch along the way. Now, I do try to catch everything. So usually I have a big pool, everything that I come across. I mean, I'll have a big pool to select from, but like the guys at work, they actually have like a set team. So I know one of them always catches a Magikarp, which is useless until you get him to, I think, level 20. And then he evolves into a Gyarados, and he's like super OP in the original games. So that's, I don't like playing that way personally, because I feel like that's cheating.
I just watched a really interesting video that asked the question: can you beat the original game, Red and Blue, with just a Magikarp? The answer is no, you cannot. And the reason for that is if you just stick with a Magikarp, you know, once you get past, I think, level 15, it learns Tackle. And then, you know, and that this is assuming you don't evolve it, right? And then you can get really far in the game, but where you lose is Lavender Town, because then you have to go in and battle a bunch of ghosts. The main Ghastly, the boss, or Hunter, or Gengar, I can't remember which boss it is, or I think it might have just even been a ghost. But you can't beat it because your only attack is a normal attack, and you can't just feint, you know, or like have him run out of PP moves because he has infinite. So you can't beat it with just a magic card.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised. I'm guessing that they were allowed to have another Pokemon for all the HMs?
Nope.
Oh, well, that probably would have been an issue too, because can Magikarp learn Cut?
This is the first game. I don't think you need Cut.
I'm pretty sure Cut's in the first one.
Nah.
Alright, anyway. HMs, if you don't know, are moves that your Pokemon can use outside of battle, typically to get you around obstacles or puzzles that you use. Like one of them is called Strength. It'll let you move boulders around in the real world. Well, in the overworld. Not the real world. That would be cool, though. But typically those are just blocking your way so that the game designers can make it so, you kind of go through the game in levels. But I mentioned earlier that, I mean, I usually catch all the Pokemon that I see. Did you try to catch them all? Was that a goal of yours, or were you just trying to get to the Elite Four?
I mean, I played these so long ago, I don't even remember. I think I was just like, yeah, let's just finish the game. And if I catch a couple, I'd do that as well.
Mm-hmm. That was one of the reasons that I went back and I bought all of those games. And this is one big gripe I actually have with Pokemon is that, the slogan is catch them all. Everybody knows that. You cannot catch them all in a single game. It is impossible. And here's why. Even in the originals, you had Red and you had Blue. For the most part, they had the same Pokemon, except for a list of maybe 20 or 30. It might have been less than. It might have been like 10. That are version-exclusive Pokemon. So these are Pokemon that you can only get in Red, or you can only get in Blue. So the only way to get all of them is to either have a friend that has that version, and will trade it to you, or to get 2 copies, which means you also need a second Game Boy, connect those together, and trade them. So my goal was to get them in the original, trade them forward to Gold, which you can do, and then you can trade them forward to Ruby or Sapphire. I think permanently, you can't go back on that one. And then you can continue doing that and trade them all the way up into the modern games. Because the other issue that you have after the originals is that you cannot catch Pokemon from other generations for the most part in most of the games. They don't put very many of those in the game in the wild for you to catch. So the only way to get them is to trade them up from other games. And that is, man, that is a massive amount of work because there are over 800 Pokemon at this point. I think the number I saw was 806, but that could be a little bit old, so it might be more than that now. And I know that they just introduced a brand new Pokemon actually in Pokemon Go, which is interesting. That hasn't been in any other game before.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. People were asking if the Pokemon Go team did that themselves or if the Pokemon Company actually did that. And it was planned by the Pokemon Company at the beginning to do that. So, that's that. But, Zach, I know you haven't heard our episode from last week because it's not out yet. But I had to make a concession and I had to use Ash Ketchum for our Super Serial segment. And so this week I have no idea who to use. So unless you have a good idea, we'll just skip Super Serial this week.
Ash's brother.
Ash doesn't have a brother.
Hash.
Okay.
No, I don't have anybody.
Thinking he eats some hash browns.
Done.
Yeah, I couldn't really think of anything good, and I don't want to force it,
Yeah, I get it.
All right, so sorry guys, no Super Serial this week. Yeah, I was gonna try to think of some concession, but I can't think of any. So sorry guys, but I thought that aside from just talking about our experiences with Pokemon, we could talk about some really interesting things. In the world of Pokemon, there are a whole lot of fan theories about a whole host of things, ranging from things that they say in the game, to things that they don't say in the games, to things that are implied, to things that explain why the games are the way they are. And I thought it would be fun to kind of go through some of those and talk about them and see if we think they could be true or what it means for the games.
Let's do it.
Okay, so the first one is pretty well known in the Pokemon community, and that is the lack of fathers in the games. Have you noticed this?
Yeah, so I was actually going to include this, or in my research for, let's see, this would be 2 weeks episode?
Yeah, 2 episodes ago.
Yeah, that this is one of those video game urban legends that, the Great Pokemon War.
Yeah, so the story is, if you've ever played a Pokemon game, you'll notice that there are hardly any middle age, like 20s up to like 40 age males in the games. You can only find like young kids, like the character you're playing, and elderly males. And there are references to wars in the game. For example, Lieutenant Surge, who's one of the gym leaders, talks about how the electric Pokemon saved him during the war. And so the theory is that there is this massive Pokemon war in the world, and almost all of the fathers were killed. And that's why they're nowhere in the game to be seen.
Yeah. It's Lieutenant Surge who drops that line. And if you look, especially in the earlier games, there's a lot of old men. There's a lot of maybe young boys, but teenagers from like 40s or 50s there's none of them. So there's that. There's the Lieutenant Surge line. And then there's also, why you're in the game, your mom might be okay with you adventuring out at like 10 years of age. It's because it's like, whatever, like it's safe now, or there's been a war or whatever. Mm-hmm. It goes more in depth into that. There's a whole nother through line about why then Team Rocket has also been able to take a foothold in crime, and the role Giovanni plays in all of it.
Yeah, that's true. It kind of goes deep. And part of it, too, is that maybe this is why you're going out and using the Pokédex to find all the Pokemon, because a lot of Pokemon species were wiped out during the war, and they need to know which ones are still alive and still in existence. And so that's the entire reason that...
Exactly.
Yeah, that you're out there doing this. I mean, what do you think about that, Zach? Do you think that makes the games too dark? Do you think that...
Confirmed!
Yeah, what do you think?
I mean, it's definitely really interesting. Obviously, it's not legit, but like... It does bring a darker edge to those video games for sure.
Yeah, I kind of like it because Pokemon has always had a, I guess, unwillingness to kind of talk about some of the real world implications of some of the things in their games. I mean, later on in some of the later games, there are those people in that age range, but if you're considering that the games age in real time, then that would make sense that the later games have people of those ages. So I kind of like this. I kind of wish that they would actually do something official that explores this a little bit more. Like maybe a novel. Like, it doesn't have to be an anime or a video game or something, but I think that would be a cool thing to explore. Have a little bit more adult-oriented story about it.
I mean, and it could be maybe even not under the Pokemon under the Pokemon title, but more of like a adult-themed spinoff.
Yeah, and I don't think that they're ever going to talk about it, because I think the reason that they have left it this way is to keep it more family-friendly. In fact, if you look at the games, there's a very large through line that you can see where, in the beginning, anything that might seem even a little bit like not kid-friendly has kind of been pulled out and not talked about again as it goes through, including just making the games easier in general. So, I'm not a big fan of that personally, but that's what they do. But that kind of goes into the next thing I wanted to talk about was Pokemon that have like really dark backgrounds or like Pokédex entries. For example, there is a Pokemon called Drifloon, and his Pokédex entry and maybe some other things around the game state that he lures children to him. And these children mistake him for a balloon, because this is like a floating Pokemon who's got kind of these arm things that hang down. And when the child gets to them, they carry the child away.
There's another Pokemon, too, that steals the souls of children.
Yeah, it's so, like, that's super dark. I mean, like, not only you're talking about kidnapping, but you're probably talking about killing this kid, because if they fall after this thing is in the sky, they're clearly dead, or if they're taken to a remote area, they're probably going to starve to death.
It's just really interesting, some of the things they put in here for a kid's game.
Yeah, and another one is that Haunter, which is, one of those classic Pokemon, is that it hides kind of in the shadows, and the first thing that comes near it, it jumps out, and it doesn't say kill, but it says take the life of, which basically means kill, right? And so that's another really dark thing that goes on. I mean, ghost Pokemon, especially in the first generation, and maybe a little bit even in the second one, were very mysterious and very dark, and kind of had these dark undertones. But as you go throughout the games, they, again, get more kiddified. So for me, I think it's interesting because if it's a real world, obviously it's not, but if it were to be a real world, things like that are what make it seem more real. If these are the animals of this world, they are not all going to be okay being put into Pokeballs and being forced to fight other things.
But they have to become subjugated.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. And then, the last one I have, I mean, there's a lot of these, but I was trying to pick ones that people might know. Hypno and Drowsy from Generation 1.
Sure.
So, their Pokédex entries state that they eat the dreams of people. So, they will find you in your sleep and they will eat your good dreams. And so, the thing is that they will find children and they will eat their good dreams because they taste better, because children typically have better, good dreams, and that leaves them without any good dreams and causes them to have nightmares. And that's terrifying because it's kind of like they're coming in and they're eating your thoughts.
Sounds legit to me.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's again, I wish that they would kind of bring some of that stuff back, but I guess it's a little bit too much for the youngins.
Is there any mod out there that does any dives into that at all?
I don't know of any in particular, but I'm sure they're out there. I know of several hacks that are definitely not kid friendly, that dive into a multitude of different types of things. And so I'm sure that that's one of them, and probably that's explored in several of them. I can't recommend any specifically because I haven't played any, but just go out there and Google Pokemon ROM hacks. There's tons. I know Glaze is a popular one. I'm pretty sure Brown is a popular one. There's one called, I think it's Ash Gray, which basically lets you play through the entire story of the anime up until the developer stopped working on it, that is.
Now, talking about these mods, Caleb, have you ever tried the self-imposed mod of Pokemon? I believe it's called Hard or Pokemon Difficult. I can't remember exactly what it's called.
No. So I'm guessing you're talking about the playthroughs that you can do with your own rules?
Yeah, exactly. And it's a well-known playthrough. I can't exactly...
Is it Nuzlocke?
Yes. Sorry. Yes, it is.
Okay. Yeah, so I haven't done it myself, but what you're talking about is the Nuzlocke challenge. You want to explain that?
No, you can go for it. I mean, basically, the Nuzlocke challenge, there's a bunch of rules to it, but the majority of the rules is if your Pokemon faints, it dies, and you cannot use it again.
Yeah, you have to release it.
You have to release it, and you can only catch one Pokemon of each type. So you only can catch it once, and if it's at a low level and you see it, you have to try to catch it. And I think there's some rules that if you see it and you're unable to catch it, then you can't catch it at all. Like if you attempt to catch it and you don't, that's it as well.
Yep, you are not allowed to try to catch it again. Yeah, I've never done one of those myself. I think that they're interesting. I kind of think that they take some of the fun out of the game, because some of the older Pokemon games are already not super easy. And adding that on top of it, I mean, that's like super crazy extreme mode.
It definitely is, but it is super fun.
Have you actually done one?
Yeah, I did. I did it, and I made it halfway through, and then I was getting lazy, and I battled some gym leader, and my starter Pokemon died, and my second strongest died, and I'm like, nope. I just didn't get back into it. I mean, I could, but it would take so much more effort. And they died out of I mean, I was being kind of stupid, but it was like a critical hit. Yeah, and just not good.
Yeah, that's the thing with those is sometimes you just have bad luck and it kills one. And if it's like your best one, you just don't feel like you have any reason to keep going. So, another thing that's a theory, this one's not quite as dark, is in the anime. The anime has been running for, I don't know, some odd years. We talked about it in that last episode, the Pokemon versus Digimon episode. It's been going forever, and Ash never ages. He's either 10 or 12, and he has stayed that same age forever. And there's a theory about this, that in the very first episode, he sees a legendary Pokemon, Ho-Oh. Which, fun fact, that was the first appearance of Ho-Oh ever, because that was before Gold and Silver came out. So they put Ho-Oh in there, and he sees Ho-Oh, and the Pokédex entry for Ho-Oh in one of the games states that if you see it, your dreams come true, or like your happiness comes true or something. And so the theory is that to Ash, his happiness is staying 10 years old forever.
The flip side of that is that in the first Pokemon episode, Ash, kind of finds Pikachu and he's trying to train him. It's not going well. He gets chased by a bunch of, is it Pidgeys?
They're Spearow.
Spearow that chase him. And then Pikachu does an incredible Thunderbolt attack that fries everything, including them, including himself, and including Ash. And Ash is knocked out for a little bit, and then he wakes up. And the theory is that the moment he wakes up, then on from all these seasons have been a dream, and that he's currently knocked out in the hospital, unconscious, and this is all just his dream.
Yeah, because the rationale is nobody could survive that.
Exactly.
Yeah, which...
he's in a coma. He did survive, but he's just in a coma.
Yeah, sorry. Nobody could survive that unscathed, rather.
Yes.
Yeah. If it were not a kid's show, I could actually see that being a possibility. Obviously, that's not going to be the case, but I kind of like that idea. I mean, Pikachu came out of the gate way stronger than he should be. And so if he hit him like that, because he was able to defeat, like, I don't know, it was a ton of Spearow. It's like 50 Spearow with one shot. So that should not have been possible.
It's definitely interesting to consider.
That actually feeds into another theory that Ash is not the first trainer for Pikachu because he is so strong when he first gets him, that somebody else has trained him before, potentially Professor Oak on his own Pokemon adventure. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. Well, not talk about, because I haven't really talked about it that much, but think about in Pokemon. And that is, are the Pokemon in this world, they're animals? And if so, do people and Pokemon eat other Pokemon?
Or, a better question is, do Pokemon eat people, and do people eat other people?
I say yes.
You don't have any evidence to disprove it. So it's automatically correct.
So the idea is that if Pokemon are the animals in this world and people eat meat, which they have been seen eating meat, where does the meat come from? It's got to come from somewhere, and the most likely source is Pokemon. And in fact, there are instances in the games where they reference things like this. There's, the games and the anime. There's a part in the anime where Brock and Ash are salivating over the thought of eating a Magikarp. And it kind of shows like a Magikarp up on the side, like filleted into different slices, or that Pidgey eat Caterpie.
But we do know there's some type of real animals, because we've seen in the anime, again, that Pidgeys have eaten worms.
Yeah, that's true. So there are some things like that. But there are even more examples of people eating things that come from Pokemon. So like if you play Generation 2, which is Gold and Silver, there's Moo Moo milk. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Yep. That's milk that comes from the Pokemon milk tank. So that's one thing. And then Slowpoke tails are a big thing in a few of the games, where they're described as super tasty. So they'll like cut off the tail of a poor Slowpoke and roast it up.
Yeah, but I mean, even then, on top of that, I think A, that's considered poaching, so it's like illegal to do, and B, their tails grow back as well.
True, but they're still eating Pokemon. There's another part, I think it's in one of the anime episodes talked about Farfetch'd, which is a bird Pokemon, saying that it's so delicious, it's been hunted to near extinction, which is pretty intense. And again, people eating Chansey eggs, which should be a little Chansey inside.
Hey man, whatever floats your boat in the Pokemon world. 10-year-old kids running around and you're worried about what they're eating?
Well, just saying. I mean, these are the kinds of things that are actually super interesting. There's a lot of really deep lore for Pokemon, some of it official, some of it fan-made, which is really interesting that you don't really get to touch on in the games, especially with the legendary Pokemon, the Creation Trio and the Weather Trio and things like that, where they explain kind of, I guess you could call them the gods of the Pokemon universe, which are actually Pokemon themselves. In fact, there was another thing, I didn't include it here, but there is I think it's a legend in the Sinnoh region, which I don't remember which game that is, that talks about how Pokemon and humans used to be indistinguishable from each other, which makes a lot of sense if Arceus, which is kind of like the god Pokemon who created the universe, supposedly, if he's a Pokemon, it would make sense that everybody kind of started out as Pokemon and then somehow, I don't know, became people. I don't know how that would actually work, but it's an interesting thing to think about.
They separated those who knew Fortnite dances from those who didn't. And those who did not participate in a Fortnite dance became human. And those who did stayed in the lesser form of a Pokemon, to be enslaved to humans to fight to the death.
Actually, it's funny. There's a manga called Pokemon, I think, Adventure, where they actually do fight to the death. There are panels that you can see them, like they'll cut other Pokemon in half.
Ooh.
Yeah,
there's
like
actually, there's another really interesting, I don't know if you would consider it a manga. This guy is an artist, and he started the Nuzlocke Challenge. So if you go ahead and look up the Nuzlocke Challenge or whatever, it's his actual playthrough, and then he characterizes it and colors it, makes it into a cartoon. Super interesting.
Oh, that's pretty cool. The Pokemon Adventure one is pretty cool because it's official. The Pokemon Company actually licensed it and put it out, but it was back like right after the games came out, before it got majorly popular. There's actually some really risque stuff in there. It's not really for kids. I think there's like maybe 6 volumes of that out there. But Zach,
oh, wow.
There is one more thing that I wanted to talk about. One of these theories that people have made. And this one's pretty dark, and I kind of wanted to get your take on it. And so if you play Pokemon, you know that you'll go throughout the world and you'll find these little items sitting everywhere that kind of look like Pokeballs just sitting on the ground, right?
Yep.
So the theory is that, again, if Pokemon are like animals, which we've seen both in the anime and in the games, that Pokemon don't always want to be used. Sometimes they're angry and they fight back. And the idea is that these trainers went out when they were unprepared, and maybe they have a level 5 something and they went into an area of level 40 somethings, and their Pokemon was killed or fainted and could no longer defend the trainer, and the trainer was then killed by the wild Pokemon. And they just lay there, gradually decomposing until ultimately there's nothing left. And so the things that you're going around picking up are leftover items from trainers that have failed and died.
You know, that's incredibly funny. More accurate would be the fact that there's a bunch of 10-year-olds running around this world, and 10-year-olds forget things, and they have just been left or dropped accidentally by these 10-year-olds. But
I don't know. I mean, if you send a 10-year-old out into the wild and they come across a bear, I think I know who's going to win.
Yes, but I have found a lot of items in towns as well, so that means that there are a lot of murderous towns and people around the Pokemon world. Which would make sense if it's devastated by war.
Yeah, I mean, there could be a lot of mentally damaged people running around the world, and they're kind of going around killing people.
For all your Pokemon theories, hit up Caleb, because he is definitely into Pokemon conspiracy theories.
No, most of these I've heard. I actually have a friend that's super, super into Pokemon, or at least was. And I've heard most of these through him, but I kind of looked these up for this podcast because I think these are actually super interesting. Obviously, they're not true. Obviously, they're not meant to be true. But it's something cool to think about, something that makes Pokemon, which is kind of a kiddie-type series, a little bit more adult, a little bit more edgy, you know. It's just, it's fun to think about things like this. It's like when we talk about MCU. It's like, oh, what's going to happen? Or why was that like that? You know, same thing with Pokemon.
Very true.
All right. Actually, that was not the last thing I had. I'm sorry.
Dun, dun, dun.
This was the last thing I had, and I will leave it with all you listeners to think about. Zach, there is a theory that Digimon are just the corrupted data of Pokemon when they are uploaded to the PC.
Confirmed.
I actually really like this theory.
Did you know that in the original Pokemon, there's a cheat you can do, like not like enter in a code, but turning off your Game Boy and moving your Pokemon and turning it off, and you can duplicate and replicate Pokemon that you have saved?
Yes, because that's how you get more than one Master Ball. You have your Pokemon hold the Master Ball, and then you do that, and like you switch boxes and you turn it off at the right time, and it will duplicate it. But if you do it wrong, it'll erase it.
Yeah, you got to be very careful, but you could have a whole army of Charizards if you wanted. But I mean, if you could do that, anything's possible.
Yeah, so I mean, this makes sense to me. Digimon are digital monsters living in a digital world. As we talked about in our Pokemon versus Digimon episode, they're not the same thing. There are many differences. Go check out that episode if you want all the details on that. But they do have some base similarities, and if it's corrupted, anything can change. So I like that a lot. And that's all I have to say about that, Zach.
Nice. Some really interesting Pokemon theories, for sure.
That's right. But that was that, and this is this. Zach, it's time for What You Been Up To. So, Zach, what have you yourself been up to in the past 2 weeks?
Several different things, actually. So the first thing I'll talk about is, have you watched the HBO miniseries by Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg, Band of Brothers?
I have not, but Courtney has. She loves it.
Ooh. Okay, great series. You need to watch it. So it's about the 101st Airborne Division in World War I, fighting in the European theater. Very, very interesting. These guys, they fought in basically all the big battles. So D-Day, the Battle of the Bulge, they were there. They secured Hitler's Eagle's Nest, which was one of his base of operations. So a lot of really interesting things that these guys did. Anyways, I am reading a book about their commander, Major Dick Winters. The book is called Biggest Brother.
Interesting. So I've never seen it, but the way I've always looked at it is kind of like a TV version of Saving Private Ryan.
It basically is. It's a TV version of Saving Private Ryan, but even better because it goes more in depth in the war.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And it's really intriguing. My wife is watching it. She likes history, but she's not like super in tune into all of that, but she even enjoys it. So, I mean, it's a great just TV miniseries. It's 10 episodes. Definitely watch it. And if you have watched it and want to know more about it, read the book Biggest Brother. Definitely highly recommended. The other thing I wanted to mention is, what is the worst Kickstarter in history? Dark Souls. That's right. Never buy anything from Steamforged again. That corrupt company will not get a single dime. They, on a side note, they're trying to right now either raise support. They might have already done it. Kickstarter for Zero Horizon Dawn. And I was teasing your cousin, my brother Blaine, and I said, I texted him about it. And he's like, he was playing the video game. So he's like, oh, that sounds like a great board game. And then I said, guess who is funding it? Steam Forged. And he's like, no.
You let him down so hard.
I know, it's a miniature game, so of course they're promising to have 50 highly detailed miniatures. Well, they're not going to deliver on half of that, and the half they do deliver on is going to be trash. So anyways, I have finally received my Guardian Dragon expansion that I specifically paid for in this game, and it is only 2 years late.
Okay, so you got it though. So how is it?
I got it. I haven't put it together yet. I'm glad I got this expansion because they had, I think, 4 or 5 different boss expansions, and one of them, apparently, I've been reading comments online, is terrible. As in, the pegs don't fit together, the pieces don't fit together. You have to do what's called a hot water trick, where you run it under extreme hot water to mold the plastic pieces so that you are able to fit it together. It's bad. It's really bad. And then, of course, on top of it, there's still all of Wave 3, which at this point, I don't think I'll ever get. But Wave 3 was all the extra bonus material we were supposed to get for free when ordering this game as well, which was promised.
Ouch. Well,
yes. So Steamforged, never buy a game from them. That's all I have to say about that.
Well, maybe you'll open it up and the one you did get will actually be really good.
I mean, I have opened it up. It does look cool. I mean, I'll enjoy it, but I mean, I would have liked it 2 years ago. You know, that would have been sweet. But
yeah, I totally get it.
I got it, so that's okay. That was mine. This was what? What is this? Caleb, what have you been up to?
Well, I was sitting here trying to think about that before we start recording, and Zach, it hasn't been a whole lot to talk about on this podcast. Actually, I've been super busy. I was out of town all weekend. I'm a great guy. I took a day off work and went to help my grandparents with some stuff. So I was doing that the past 2 days, and then I was doing other stuff out of town the other 2 days. And
what were Grandma and Grandpa doing?
Oh well, you know,
your grandparents,
they're selling their old house, and so they needed some help getting some of that ready and stuff. So
what a great grandchild!
What?
I heard you're the favorite. You
and
Courtney are the favorites.
I did stay and help them, so I kind of feel like I deserve...
I live in another state, man.
Hey, you could always move down here.
You could always move up here.
That's true.
My dad has offered you a job. All our listeners are reading all this personal garbage. The drama between the cousins.
Anyway, so I've been super busy. I haven't done a whole lot. I sealed some wooden boards, if anybody cares about that. I used some polyacrylic and just sealed those up.
Nice.
Otherwise, really not much. I did actually watch another episode of Punisher. I think it was episode 8 or 9. It's still great. It's still going good. I guess we haven't talked about most of the Netflix series got canceled. So that's kind of put me off a little bit from watching those.
But I've heard Daredevil Season 3 is really good.
I haven't started yet. I've been trying to finish Punisher before I jump in.
Do you know the premise?
I know what's in the trailers.
Do you know the enemy?
I know who I think the enemy is.
All I can say is it's Daredevil comic accurate for a new villain that arises, which is phenomenal.
Sweet. I'll probably jump into it soon. Other than that, what am I going to be doing? I'm also not sure. I'm pretty busy. So, my What You Been Up To is kind of lame this week.
That's okay.
Well, Zach?
I forgive you.
Oh, thanks, man. That means a lot. That was weighing on my heart really heavily.
Good.
Zach, well, I think we did. I think that's another episode.
What?
I said, Zach, I think we did it. I think that's another episode. I'm losing you.
Bye.
All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. And also, please go over and check out Taylor Poole at taylorpoolmusic.com. He's an awesome guy who did all of our intro music, and he's pretty great. Go drop him a line.
And if you want to go see Pokemon streamed, then for sure do not head over to CNC Power Hour, because they only stream Magic the Gathering and sometimes video games, but probably not Pokemon video games. But I wouldn't know, but probably not.
I don't think they're streaming Pokemon right now anyway. They usually stream video games on Saturday. And while you are on the internet, please go check out our website where you can find all of our episodes, some information about us, drop us a line, and that is the best way to share our show with all of your friends. Just go do that. Thanks for listening to 'Cause We're Nerds. Stay up to date with all the nerdy news and podcast drops by following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also leave us comments and feedback at 'causewe'renerds@gmail.com. That's CUZWERENERDS@gmail.com. And as always, if you enjoy this podcast, we would love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. The Doctor has just regenerated, so when's a better time to take a look back on the show's history? Next week, we dive into the long and winding history of Doctor Who. How it started, how it failed, and how, much like the Doctor herself, it's gotten another life. We'll see you next week on 'Cause We're Nerds. Stay nerdy.
Oh man, I'm glad this episode is over. I've had to urinate for the last 45 minutes. It's bad.
Oh no.